Zoe never expected her world to change so suddenly. One moment she was standing in a room with Catherine, and the next pain shot through her as the knife pierced her stomach. Catherine, cold and unforgiving, told her that she would never let her son Blaine give up his life as a surgeon for her. Just then, the doorbell rang. It was Blaine. Zoe could barely call out his name when Catherine told her that she had already made sure no one would come to help. As Catherine ran to open the door, Zoe collapsed and dialed 911 but barely managed to speak. She should have died that night, but fate had other plans. She survived, and so did the life growing inside her, her son, Max. But joy quickly turned into fear when he was diagnosed with leukemia soon after the birth. Ever since, he had been in and out of hospitals, and Zoe had done everything she could to protect him, leaving her past behind. Her mother visited often, bringing food and comfort, but the pain of watching Max suffer never eased. One day, her sister Ziva bluntly questioned who Max's father was and why was never around. Zoe wished she could tell them the truth, but Catherine's threat still loomed over her. If Blaine ever found out about Max, Catherine would make sure he never saw another day. Just then, she saw him, her past in front of her eyes. It was Blaine, her ex-boyfriend, and the father of her son, Max. He was the doctor in the same hospital where her son, Max, was being treated. As Zoe tried to escape his sight, Ziva, her sister, had fixated her eyes on the hot doctor. Later that day, Zoe buried herself in work, trying to secure a major interior design project. But when her sister ended up in the hospital after a reckless night out, hoping to get treated by the hot doctor she had her eyes on, Zoe was pulled back into the place she wanted to avoid. She scolded Ziva for wasting the doctor's time. Zoe's heart pounded as she watched him examine Ziva, when fate got her face to face with the last person she ever wanted to see, Blaine Dexter, the man she had loved once. Looking at her past, she accidentally cut herself with the glass that slipped from her hands. Blaine reached out to help, and for a moment she forgot everything, the pain, the past, the secrets. But reality came crashing back when he pulled away, his voice distant, his touch fleeting. The next day, Zoe's boss called with good news. A wealthy new client wanted her to design his home and wanted to discuss the project at a restaurant. Excited for the opportunity, she arrived at the restaurant for their meeting only to find Blaine at the same restaurant. Hoping to avoid him, she tried to hide herself behind the menu when Blaine stood in front of her, revealing that he was the client she was waiting for. She tried to remain professional, offering to have someone else take over the project, but Blaine refused. He wanted her. Not in the way he once had, but still, he wanted her expertise for his home that he was planning to share with his current fiancée. The dinner was filled with tension, old wounds reopening with every exchanged glance. Zoe avoided his gaze, showing him different options for his future home that she once thought of sharing with him. She thought she could keep things businesslike. Just then, Blaine asked the question she had feared for years. "Why did you leave?" She had no answer, at least not one she could say out loud. Before she could find an excuse, Blaine's phone rang. He was needed for surgery, and just like that, he was gone again. As she watched him leave, memories flooded her mind, the way he had once cared for her after her accident, the way his touch had made her feel safe and got her chills down her spine. At the hospital, Blaine threw himself into work, but his mind kept drifting back to Zoe. He had thought he had moved on, but seeing her again stirred something deep inside him. Meanwhile, Zoe's son, Max, wandered through the hospital halls, playing with his ball. When he accidentally bumped into a doctor, he looked up and saw Blaine. He asked if Blaine was single because he wanted to introduce him to his mother to fix them up. Blaine smiled, amused by the boy's boldness, but when Max mentioned that he was sick and might never wake up, Blaine felt a sharp pain in his chest. He asked a nurse about the boy's condition and learned that Max had leukemia and no matching donor had been found. The thought of losing hope weighed heavily on him. Meanwhile, Zoe's heart raced as when she found out that Max had befriended Blaine. She had given Nurse Ramona strict instructions that Dr. Dexter could never know the truth about Max. He couldn't know his last name or his connection to her. The past was dangerous and keeping it buried was the only way to protect her son. Talon, Zoe's boss, reminded her of her responsibilities. The deal with Blaine was crucial and there was no room for mistakes. She assured him she had it under control, though inside she was crumbling. When she called Blaine to discuss business, his casual response caught her off guard. He invited her to his house to look over designs. When he mentioned his fiancée's key under the mat, Zoe was reminded once again of the life he had built without her. But she had to be professional. She had to be strong. Zoe arrived at Blaine's house feeling overwhelmed by memories. She told herself to stay focused. Blaine's engagement had nothing to do with her. He had moved on, and so had she. But seeing him again, standing in the home he shared with someone else, made her chest tighten. He teased her about her jealousy, stirring emotions she didn't want to face. He reminded her of the past, of how reckless and dangerous she once was. She fought back, but he only smiled. They were here for business, but he suggested dinner first. At the restaurant, the night took an unexpected turn. Blaine playfully called it their second date, but Zoe remained firm this was business. When Blaine asked about her love life, she lied. She told him she was married. The words felt heavy, but they were necessary. Then, Sophia Quincy arrived. The perfect woman, rich and beautiful. The kind of woman Blaine's mother would approve of. She greeted Zoe with politeness, though there was an undeniable tension between them. As she kissed Blaine, Zoe forced herself to look away. This was reality. She could never compete with someone like Sophia. Then her phone rang. It was the hospital. Max's condition had worsened. She had no choice but to leave, apologizing hurriedly. Sophia's casual remark about having children with Blaine cut through Zoe like a knife. She walked away, refusing to let the pain show. As Zoe rushed to the hospital, Blaine found himself staring at the necklace Sophia had picked up. It was the same one he had given Zoe years ago. She had kept it all this time. Did that mean she still cared? He brushed off Sophia's remark to Zoe that why she, being a menial interior designer, had a necklace this expensive. But something about it haunted him, so he excused himself to go to the restroom, while Sophia, unable to let go, called someone to find more about Zoe. At the hospital, Max had stabilized, but more tests were needed. Tests that cost more money than Zoe had thought. Desperate, she realized there was only one option left. The necklace. The one thing she had held onto all these years. With a heavy heart, she had to pawn it. But when she found the necklace missing from her neck, she started panicking. That night, she went back to Blaine's house. She needed the necklace back. But when Blaine opened the door, his pain was evident. He demanded to know why she had kept it all these years. She couldn't tell him. Not yet. As she turned to leave, he called her back. His voice was softer this time. He put the necklace on her, telling her not to lose it again. She walked away, more confused than ever. The next day, as Zoe visited the hospital, she stumbled on Blaine and his coffee fell over her shirt. He offered to help her with a change where things started to heat up when Zoe got Sophia's text asking her to meet. Just then, Blaine noticed that Zoe wasn't wearing the necklace and asked her about it. She told him that she had to sell it. Blaine couldn't believe what he heard and asked why, but Zoe couldn't tell him. Just then, Blaine was called in by another doctor for an important surgery. At the restaurant, Sophia was waiting for Zoe. Zoe apologized to her, telling her that she was caught up at work, but Sophia confronted Zoe. She had called her office and knew she spent time at the hospital. Her words were sharp, her warnings clear. Then, Zoe noticed the necklace around Sophia's neck, the one she had sold. Sophia smirked, taunting her that she doesn't like when people eye on her things. Zoe forced a polite smile, knowing the battle had only begun. At home, Blaine saw Zoe's necklace on Sophia's neck and confronted Sophia about it. She told him that she got it from a pawn shop where Zoe had sold it because she needed money. But for what? The question lingered in his mind. Meanwhile, Talon, Zoe's boss, approached her with an opportunity. Since she had been handling big accounts, he decided to send her to Scottsdale for a few days. It was a huge deal, a step up in her career, and exactly what she had been working for. She accepted without hesitation, though a part of her felt uneasy about leaving Max behind. Later that evening at the hospital, Blaine ran into Max, the little boy who always seemed to brighten his shifts. Max was sneaking out of his room, but instead of scolding him, Blaine asked where he was going. Max hesitated before admitting the truth. He wanted to buy his mother a pet. She didn't even like animals, but he didn't care. He just wanted to leave her with something that would outlive him, something that would bring her comfort when he was gone. Blaine's heart clenched at the boy's words. He assured Max that he had plenty of life left to live, but the child simply smiled, wise beyond his years. Max then mentioned that Blaine hadn't met his mother yet, insisting that he would really like her. Blaine chuckled, playing along, and offered to take Max to a pet store nearby. The boy's face lit up with excitement, and for a moment, everything felt right in Blaine's world. Meanwhile, Zoe was struggling with her decision to leave. She informed her mother about her trip and asked if she could visit Max in her place. Her mother agreed immediately. Zoe wanted to spend every second with Max before she left, but suddenly Zoe froze when she saw something that made her world stop. There in front of her was Blaine, and standing beside him was Max, her son. Her past and present collided in a way she never thought possible. Blaine was so natural with Max. They fit together in a way that made her heart ache. She had spent so long keeping the truth from him, from everyone, but as she watched them, something inside her shifted. Maybe she didn't have to carry this burden alone. Maybe life didn't have to be so lonely. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was time for the truth to come out. But fate had other plans. Just as she gathered her courage, Catherine, Dexter, and Sophia arrived at the hospital. Zoe's heart pounded. If Catherine saw Max and her, there was no telling what she would do. The past had finally caught up with her, and there was no turning back. Would Blaine learn the truth? Would he be the donor Max desperately needed? And if he did, would he forgive Zoe for keeping his son a secret all these years?
Hey, I'm Zoe. If you're wondering what happens next, download the Pocket FM app now and listen to the exciting episodes of Rekindled Heartache.